Well, the image is one thing, and a human being is another, you know. It's very hard to live up to an image, I'll put it that way.
Now, Gail, you are the person most responsible for this controversial issue of whether Elvis Presley is alive or dead. Now, her story is a fascinating one, and no matter what you believe, it is a story worth telling. Gail, why don't you tell us how you became involved in this case?
Well, I, like the rest of the world, heard the news that Elvis Presley died at the age of 42, and I was shocked. When I heard that Elvis Presley had died, I was amazed. It seemed that almost overnight a very mortal man was deified. My curiosity led me to write the novel Orion, a fictitious story about a singer who was a prisoner of his fame, a man who ended up hoaxing his own death. The book was sold to a major publisher, a sizable advance was received, as well as a promise of extensive promotion. After the book was released, I began receiving calls that the books were rapidly disappearing under very strange circumstances. More than one store reported that men in business suits came in and purchased the books in quantities, and that once they were gone, the stock was never replenished, which is a very strange business practice. My repeated calls to the publisher were ignored, my questions unanswered. Meanwhile, as I was investigating the mysterious disappearance of my book, the media and many of the fan clubs were questioning the death of Elvis Presley. Several fans brought to my attention the fact that Elvis's middle name was misspelled on his grave at Graceland. This and other discrepancies led me to write Is Elvis Alive? I was then contacted by Monty Nicholson, a veteran investigator with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, who had written a book called The Presley Arrangement, which focuses on Elvis faking his death. Monty and I compared notes and found that despite never having heard of each other, our information was almost identical. My appearances on radio and television shows led to many phone calls, leads, lots of new information. In October of 1988, around 2:30 in the morning, a call came to my home from a man identifying himself as Elvis Presley. Realizing, of course, that he could have been an impersonator, I asked some key questions which were answered correctly. And although my equipment was antiquated, I taped the call.
And in fact, you have a tape of that phone call and a transcript of some of the conversation.
Yes, it was kind of funny. It's like the dentist with cavities. I had a very poor tape recorder. Actually, we were in the midst of moving, and I went into the garage and got this old clunky tape recorder with a suction cup that didn't stay on the phone very well. But anyway, I did the best I could, and the call did come in.
Major surgery?
Major shock.
What happened?
Surgery. Major shock.
What happened?
On my daughter, and it was a surprise to me.
Oh, okay.
It was a very big surprise.
Was Priscilla there?
Priscilla's everywhere. We really didn't favor.
Well, I mean, was she at the wedding?
Yeah, she was there.
Is she happy about it?
You can ask her. I was thinking, she has old people.
Well, maybe you'll be a grandfather one of these days.
Well, I'll be part of my grandfather.
You'd definitely be out?
The dust will settle and everything before then.
Oh,
believe me.
Now, how is the world going to react to Elvis Presley being a grandfather?
It's not a question, it's how I'll react.
People have asked if it was a wax dummy in the coffin, and I laughingly say, well, there was a wick at the top of the head.
Well, thank goodness nobody lived.
The great meltdown, huh?
Worse than that, nuclear reactor. The biggest story of meltdown in history.
All right. I'm curious, how many of you here think that was Elvis Presley? May I see a show of hands, please? All right. Now, Gail, what makes you think it was actually Elvis talking to you?
Well, I asked him questions that only Elvis would know the answers to. He answered correctly. Plus, it was a very compelling way he spoke. What do you think?
Well, all right. Right now, three possibilities come to mind. First, that you wrote and you produced a phone call yourself in order to sell some books. How would you respond to that?
Well, I can't prove that that's not true, but I can emphatically state it is not true. The call came into my home. I took it. I taped it.
All right. The second possibility has to be that you received a crank phone call from one of the best Elvis impersonators I've ever heard, because I know Elvis, I knew the sound of his voice, and that caller would have fooled me. And of course, then the third possibility would be that Elvis, in fact, did call you.
Well, of course, as I mentioned, the thought of an impersonator crossed my mind. I did ask him questions. He answered correctly. But that tape was also played for Gene Smith, Elvis's first cousin. He stated he believed it was Elvis, that all the nuances were correct. I believe it was Elvis.
All right.